So in our current series, we're just talking about being discipled by Jesus. We're saying, like, what would it have been like to be one of Jesus' original 12, to sit at his feet and listen, to be taught by Jesus himself? And although we can't kind of transport ourselves back in time, how great would that be to kind of be in person? The reality is we can be discipled by Jesus as we pick up our Bibles and are taught by him regularly. And as we're talking about, especially in these couple of weeks, like we really, this is one of these values we believe in our church, that you and I, we need to be opening up our Bibles, being taught by God, not just when we're in church on the weekends, but on our own time as well. And so we're taking a few weeks to say, well, you know, if we really believe that, let's reinforce that. And so every week we put in your bulletins, not just a bunch of upcoming event information, but in the middle of there's this insert that has discussion questions that several of our small groups use. People use them for individual reflection. And then in there is also some suggested Bible readings that you can take throughout the week and spend some time with God throughout the week. So what we're doing in these few weeks is just to say, well, let's kind of reinforce that and say you take and you read a chapter during the week of the Bibles 3 times, and then I'm going to preach from it, and let's just see what happens with that. So this week we're in Mark chapter 14, but before you grab your Bibles and turn there, because last week we just said, you know what, hey, let's all do this, and let's all take our Bibles, and if you didn't bring yours, grab your Bible that's in front of you in the seat back, open it up. Today we're going to do something totally different, though, because I want you to think about this idea. Sometimes it is unhelpful to read your Bible. All right, what do we mean by that? Before you kind of run from here and like find another church that teaches the truth, right? What do we mean by that? Think about this. When I need to know something, I'll go find a book, or I will Google it, and I will scan the book, I will scan whatever I'm reading, I'll find what I need, I'll get what I need, and then I'm out of there. I go, I get what I need, I'm gone. Similar when I'm reading, I am fully in control of what I'm doing, I'm scanning, I look through it, I get what I want. Anybody ever, I mean, that's one of the ways to read, is to kind of skim read, you find it, you get the key, you get out of there. I'm fully in control. But think about this. When you're listening to somebody, you are totally out of control. I mean, not out of, no, there's a better way to say that. When you're listening to somebody, you are totally not in control. You are at the mercy of the speaker, the teacher, the storyteller. When I'm reading, I can kind of put emphasis on what I want to emphasize, and I can conveniently ignore what I don't really want to pay attention to. But when I'm listening, the speaker gets to emphasize, gets to tell me. You know, the reality is, a lot of the folks who lived in Jesus' time and in Bible times, they were illiterate. They were not going to just go get a book out of the library and read it. Libraries didn't even really, exist in that time as that way. Some of them could go to the synagogue, and surely, they read the scrolls that were scripture. But the reality is, even most of the words that we read in our Bible, the first time they were ever communicated to a human audience was not in written form, but they were spoken. And that audience had to sit there and listen. So today we're going to do something different, okay? Today I just want you to put your Bibles away. You can read them later. You can. You should. You need to. But just not right now. And if you're just kind of questioning, maybe I'm going to get it wrong, you can fact check me later when you go online and get the YouTube video or listen to the podcast. You can download it later. You can follow along with your Bibles, and you can double check. You can fact check me. You should anyway. So it's all right. But right now, I just want you to put your Bibles away, and I just want you to listen. And I'm just going to kind of read. I mean, in Mark chapter 14, there are some great stories in which we would love to have been there, to experience it firsthand. And that's what I'm going to invite you to do today. Maybe if you're not too close to nap time, you could maybe just kind of close your eyes and really listen and let yourself be there. But just put yourself there, hear these stories, and feel the impact of what would have been like to be there, to hear these words for the first time. So let me read to you. The Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away. And the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the festival, they said, or the people may riot. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came in with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume. made of pure nard. She broke the jar and she poured the perfume on his head. Can you smell it? Oh, it's beautiful. This is costly, expensive perfume. Like this is the best that she had. This is the best thing she had. This, historians would tell us that this is probably, well, we're going to read in the story, like this would have cost a year's worth of wages for a day laborer. And she pours the entire jar on Jesus' head, and it fills the room. And it's this moment of extravagance. Some would have called it reckless. Indeed, what we see here in a minute is they did. Well, look what it says next, or hear what it says. Some of those present, they were saying indignantly to one another, why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. Man. Here we have this moment where this woman just wants to do something great for Jesus. She wants to do something loving and extravagant. She wants to adore and to anoint and to worship Jesus. And she takes the most costly thing she has and she gives it to him. And they're over there grumbling. How do you feel about these guys now? They rebuked her harshly, and she's getting yelled at in the very moment she's trying to do something beautiful for Jesus. How do you think Simon thought? As this week, as I was reading through the story over and over and trying to be there and hear it, I've never noticed the part about Simon the leper. They're in the home of Simon the leper, which he must not have been a leper. In other words, he had leprosy. But he didn't have leprosy at the time of the story, because if you had leprosy, you weren't allowed to be in your home. You were cast out, and you would live with all the others in the leper colony. But we know this guy named Jesus who regularly healed lepers. He must have been the man formerly known as Simon the leper, because he's back at home now with family and friends. Jesus is in town, and what does the man who's been healed by Jesus do? He invites Jesus over to come into his home. Maybe the last time he saw him was when he was living in the leper colony healed, but now he's in a home, and he brings him into his home with family and friends, and it is a celebration. He's so appreciative of Jesus. This woman's appreciative of Jesus, and these guys are grumbling. Are you there? Can you feel it? Can you smell it? Can you feel the tension in the air? Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you. You can help them anytime you want. The reality is you probably don't even want to, though. You're just saying that. And sorry, he didn't say that. That's not in there. I just better get back to the story here. But you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Now that's worship. That is adoration of Jesus. Can you feel it? And then you got to feel this, because it's the next part of the story. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples of Jesus, went to the chief priests to betray Jesus to them. And they were delighted to hear this, and they promised to give him money. So he watched over for an opportunity to hand Jesus over to them. You notice this is the second reference to money in a couple of verses. And in each of these references and conversations about money, it's the bad guys in the story. How do you feel about this Judas who's going to betray his teacher, his discipler, just for some money? Now it's tomorrow. All right. Now the story's going to shift, and now that we're in kind of listening and feeling and kind of getting into the story mode, you're going to notice some things. We're going to kind of notice some things pop up and be kind of regularly referred to here. But here's the next day, okay? So on the next day, it's the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, and when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb. So Jesus' disciples, they asked him, where do you want us to go and make preparations to eat the Passover? So he sent 2 of the disciples, telling them, go in the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him and say to the owner of the house that he enters, the teacher asks, where's the guest room where I may eat my Passover with my disciples? He'll show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there. So the disciples left. They went into the city, and they found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared for the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who's eating with me." And that's an odd turn. I mean, here they are having this wonderful moment, time with Jesus. They're celebrating the Passover. And, a couple months ago, we talked about how this ancient Jewish festival that was filled with it was a meal that they would share together, but it was filled with all this symbolism, the meat and the animal sacrificed at the temple, and they would bring them back. And it was a lamb that had to be pure and unblemished, and the bread and the wine, every part, so much symbolism in that meal. What we discovered is that God had arranged it so all of it would point to Jesus, the ultimate sacrifice, and the symbol of our faith is a cross, which symbolizes the sacrifice of Jesus, the perfect, unblemished lamb who gave away his life for the sins of the world. I mean, this is a powerful moment that they had celebrated. Now they get to celebrate it with their teacher, and he looks it up at them and he says, "By the way, all of you," he looks up and he says, "one of you will betray me." Like, Jesus, why you got to ruin the moment, man? They were saddened, and one by one they said to him, "Surely you don't mean me." Well, not me, Jesus. No, not me either. Neither me, nor me, not me. I would never do it. I wouldn't. They go around the table. "It's one of the 12, Jesus replied, "one who dips bread into the bowl with me. Now the Son of Man, I will go just as is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Way to encourage us all there, Jesus. Jesus goes through, they have the remaining part of the meal. When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So they go out to this place in the park, and they're with Jesus again. Okay, now, if you haven't read the story before, this is leading up to Jesus' arrest and trial, crucifixion. We're really close, right? So we get out to the mountain, and Jesus says this, "You will all fall away," Jesus told them, "for it is written," and then he quotes an Old Testament prophet, "I'll strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Jesus brings it up again. Like, come on. We're supposed to be like Passover. It's supposed to be a great, encouraging, wonderful moment. Jesus, first of all, he said, one of you is going to betray me. And now he says, by the way, all of you are going to fall away. Why would he tell us this? Just so that they didn't forget? I don't know. But then he says, but after I have risen, I'll go ahead of you into Galilee. Peter, at this point, one of the 12, Peter declared, even if everybody falls away, I will not. He's bold. He's like, no, you brought it up now several times. Jesus, I'm your pal, I'm your buddy, I'm your disciple. You have been teaching me everything that you know. You've been pouring your life into me. I'm giving my life to you. Even if everybody else falls away, I will not. Truly, I tell you, Jesus answered to Peter, today, yes, tonight, before the rooster crows twice, tomorrow morning, you yourself will disown me 3 times. You, Peter. But Peter insisted emphatically, even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you. Jesus, you've done so much for us. We're yours. Jesus, you can trust us. And all the others, they said the same thing. Well, then they went on to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took Peter, James, and John along with him, kind of the inner circle of his 12. These are the core of leaders. When he's gone to heaven, they're gonna take the lead in the church. Takes them 3, and listen to what it says. And with them, he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. I don't know what it looked like, what it felt like, or what he was describing to him, but they could see that he was visibly upset, that that it was just coming out. And he says to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, he said. Now, I know we don't like it when our leaders get vulnerable and they begin to share their weaknesses and their pain and when they're hurting, because we want our leaders to be strong so that we know that we can follow them, right? And then sometimes the leaders break down and they're having a hard time, and this is one of those moments. He says, guys, if there's anybody I ought to be able to share this with, I'm having a hard time here, guys. My soul, I am overwhelmed, and I'm overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He said to them, stay here and keep watch. Now, if you're like a follower of Jesus and you've just said, I would die with you if that's what it called for, Jesus. And he is pouring out his heart to you, and he says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch. What do? Like, you keep watch. Going a little further, he fell to the ground, and he prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. Abba, Father, he said, everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. He knew the plan that he, God the Father, God the Holy Spirit, had come up with together and agreed upon the plan since the fall of humans, when the humans had gone their own way, done their own thing, and every one of us went along that path. The plan to redeem the humans from their own self-destructive choices. The plan was that the Son would become a human and would give his life and die for their sin on their behalf. I believe it was Jesus' plan. He agreed to it. It's not just like the Father said, you have to do this. It was none of that, right? He was fully in on it. It was his plan. He was ready for it. But now, looking death and the incredible suffering that would go with it right in the eye, knowing that it's going to happen like tomorrow and the next day, and that there's going to be incredible suffering and the pain of death, not only physically, but the spiritual and emotional element as well, as he bears the sin of the world, and a holy God, his Father, looks away as he can't stand to see his Son suffering, holding sin, and being that close to sin, and he looks away, and he experiences this disconnect from his Father for the first time ever. And he says, Father, everything's possible for you. Take this cup from me. If there's any other way, God, let's do it. But not what I want, but what you want. Then he returned to his disciples, and he found them sleeping. Guys, look what he says. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Why does he point out Peter? Why not point out Peter, James, and John? They're all sleeping. They're all in trouble. Well, maybe it's because Peter is the one who opened his big mouth and said it the loudest and the most emphatically, I'll never deny you. I don't know. And that was kind of what Peter was known for anyways, like speaking and then thinking, acting and then thinking. I don't know. Maybe that's why. Or this. We're reading the Gospel of Mark. We're like, who's this Mark guy? I mean, Matthew, there was one of the followers of Jesus. One of the 12 was Matthew. John was another one of the followers, one of the 12. The Gospel of Luke, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Luke, we read early that Luke was hired by someone else who paid his way to be able to go around and interview everybody he could find to verify these stories and put the stories in a logical order, one that they could really trust. Because there were lots of different Gospels about Jesus. They didn't all agree. And like the one of Luke to, paid his way to make sure we get it right. So who's Mark? Well, historians, scholars, theologians, folks a lot smarter than I, looking at the evidence and other historical writings, believe that Mark and the Gospel of Mark wrote down the stories of Jesus after hearing Peter preach them over and over and over. And that the Gospel of Mark is basically the Gospel of Peter, and Peter is the one who told these stories over and over. Mark heard them, and Mark wrote them down for Peter. Interestingly enough, we believe that Mark was the first of the Gospels to be written, and when you read Matthew and Luke and even parts of John, it looks like they took Mark and they started with Mark, and then they added the other stories that Mark didn't include. Didn't disagree, doesn't make any of them wrong. They just said, there's other stories. I mean, everything Jesus did in 3 years is a whole lot more than this, right? And so they added the other stories and filled in some of the gaps that just God didn't inspire Mark to write, but Mark was the first one, inspired by Peter. Now, that's the best theory. Now, if that's true, think about this. Here we have these stories that came from Peter. And look at how Peter tells his own story. In fact, when folks like to say, oh, the Bible, I don't really believe it, it's all just kind of made up. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all those guys, all the followers of Jesus, they made up the stories of Jesus and the resurrection just so they could become famous, they could become leaders to prop themselves up. But think about it this way. If you are making up a story that never really happened, how are you going to paint yourself? You're always going to paint yourself in the best light possible. If your goal in writing this fake story that you're going to say is true is for your own glory, you're never going to show yourself as having messed up time and time again. But look at how Peter tells his own story. He says, I remember the time when Jesus said, you'll all fall away. And I said, Jesus, I'll never fall away. And I remember the time Jesus said, guys, I'm hurting and I'm having a hard time. Will you just stay with me and keep watch? And I fell asleep 3 times. I want you to put yourself in Simon's place today. Hear this story as Simon lived it. Simon, he said to Peter, are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Once more he went away and he prayed the same thing. When he came back again, finally Peter kept awake that time. No, that's not what it says. When he came back, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy and they did not know what to say. Returning the 3rd time, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough. The hour's come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let's go. Here comes my betrayer. And just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared, and with him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer, he had arranged a signal with them. The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard, because we know what he's capable of. Going in once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and he kissed him. The men seized Jesus and they arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Am I leading a rebellion, said Jesus, that you've come with swords and clubs to capture me? I mean, every day I was with you teaching in the temple courts and you didn't arrest me then, but the scriptures must be fulfilled. Interesting here that when Peter's telling the story, he does not tell us that he was the one who grabbed the sword, took a swipe, and cut off the ear. Maybe knowing that some people would look upon him as a hero in that moment, but that as he looked back, he realized again he did the wrong thing. The rest of the other Gospels who tell us say that it was Peter who grabbed the sword and he just, did what he usually did. Rather than think, he just takes action and he swings wildly. The guy ducks and he misses and he only gets an ear and he's just trying to do his best to defend Jesus, right? Finally, Jesus is going to be proud of me because I did the right thing and I defended Jesus. I stood up for him. Jesus said that I was going to betray him and deny him and all that kind of stuff. Not betray him, deny him and fall away. I didn't fall away that time. And that time, the other Gospels tell us, Jesus looked at him and says, Peter, put your sword away. He picks up the guy's ear. He heals them. Then everyone deserted him and fled, just like he said they would do, including Peter. So they took Jesus to the high priest and to all the chief priests and the elders and the teachers of the law. They all came together for Jesus' trial. And look what Peter tells us. And Peter followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest. And there he sat with the guards and he warmed himself at the fire. After he fled, run away, you realize that again, he had fallen away. He's like, I'm not going to be the guy that falls away. I told Jesus I'd be there, and he said I was going to deny him. He said I would fall away, and I said, no, I'm not going to fall away. And so this time he says, okay, I ran away, but I'm coming back. And he follows as close as he can. He gets into the courtyard of the high priest where this whole crazy trial is going to take place, and he's there with the guards warming himself by the fire. And he can see Jesus and probably within earshot to overhear the whole story of what happens in this trial. And he's there. He's like, I'm not going to fall away. They go through the trial. At one point, the high priest asks Jesus, are you the Messiah? Are you the Savior? Are you the Son of the Blessed One? Are you the Son of God? Jesus said, I am. And you will see me sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit at him. They blindfolded him, struck him with their fists, and said, prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. While Peter was below in the courtyard, one of the servant girls of the high priest, she came by, and when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked closely at him. You were also with that Nazarene Jesus, weren't you? She said. But he denied it. I don't know or understand what you're talking about, he said. And he went out into the entryway. When the servant girl saw him there, she said again to those standing around, this fellow is one of them. And again, he denied it. After a little while, those standing near, they said to Peter, surely you are one of them. I mean, you're a Galilean after all. And he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, I don't know this man you are talking about. When it says he called down curses, he's not using four-letter words. He is invoking a curse based on a god. In other words, it goes something like this. I swear to you that I am telling the truth. And if I am lying to you, may God in heaven strike me dead. That's what it means to curse somebody or to curse yourself. I'm telling the truth. If I'm lying, may God strike me dead. And what is he saying? He's saying, I don't know Jesus. I've never met him ever in my life. I swear I call down God to strike me dead if I'm lying, which he is lying. And immediately the rooster crowed the second time. And Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken to him, quote, before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and he wept. And this time he's really messed up. Again and again and again. And I think the old voices from the schoolyard, from his parents, from the first couple of employers he worked for, all those messages came back to him. You're a screw up. You're a mess up. You're a failure. You're a loser. And now the one time he really wanted to get it right and defend the Messiah who had changed his life, he messed up even there. 3 times over, calling curses down upon himself. And I think Peter at this point slumps his shoulders and just slinks away. In fact, we don't see him again in the story. He's gone. He's gone. Jesus is condemned. The trial goes on. He's condemned. He's beaten some more. He's crucified. Makes that long walk out to the city. He's crucified on the hill. He dies. Other disciples are there. Mary's there. John's there. A few others are there at the crucifixion. Where's Peter? He's gone. He's out of the story. Hiding out in shame. There's something about men. And maybe it's for everyone. I can only speak from my own experiences and from especially the guys I've talked to. But there's something about men that we like to look strong and bold, that we can take a lot and handle it. But the ego really is pretty fragile. That we can take a failure, maybe 2, but when failure stacks up on failure, then shame begins to set in. And we begin to believe the voices and the words that we've heard before, and we say things like, maybe it is me. Maybe I really am a loser. Maybe I am a failure and always will be. I think that's where Peter is in this story. But the word gospel means good news. It's always good news. And God doesn't leave the story with a bad ending. And even though Peter sees that he's out of the game, that he's disqualified himself, that he's out, never coming back again, here's what we know is the rest of the story. See, the rest of the story is Jesus does. He is crucified. He dies a terrible death, bearing the sins of all of us. And he is buried on Friday night. And all day Saturday, he is dead in a tomb, lying in a tomb. And all of his followers, they're disheartened, they're frustrated, they're depressed, they're wondering what happened to their Savior. And then on Sunday morning, a group of women, they're the ones who get up early in the morning, and they go back to the tomb where he was buried, and they're going to prepare his body for burial. And the story tells us that they get there, and the massive, large, multi-ton stone that was rolled in front of the entrance of the tomb has been somehow rolled away. They peek in to see what is inside and what is going on, and they see an angel in there, and that angel in there says this to them. When they looked up, the angel says to them, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. But," here's the good news, "he has risen. He's not dead anymore. He's defeated sin, death, the grave, hell, forever. You're looking for Jesus. He's risen, so he's not here, because this is where dead people hang out, and he's not a dead person anymore. So he is risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. So he's alive. Now go and tell the disciples he's going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." But I skipped a part. This is what the angel actually says. "Go tell his disciples and Peter he's going ahead of you. Meet him there." It's a little bit redundant. Peter's one of the disciples. You didn't have to say and Peter, just say the disciples, because that includes Peter. No, Peter at this point doesn't really include himself as a disciple anymore. He said, "I have messed up, I've failed, I'm no longer worthy, I'm out, man." And the angel says, Jesus wants you to make sure you invite Peter. Make sure Peter knows that he is invited, that Jesus wants him there. Because Peter, you might have failed, but you are not a failure. You might have made a mistake or several, but you are not a mistake. And Jesus says, "I have great plans for you, Peter." And Jesus goes after Peter, and he finds him in his shame and condemnation and sense of failure and messed up, and brings him back. You know what? Jesus says the same thing to you as well. You may have messed up so many times that you think you are out forever, but you're not. You may have failed so many times that you think you are a failure, and Jesus says you are not a failure. You might have think that you have made so many mistakes that you're just a mistake, and Jesus says, no, you're not a failure, you're not a mistake, and I have great plans for you. And Jesus says, I want you to come meet me even in the middle of your failure and defeat. And here's how I know that Peter got the message. Because years later, probably decades later, he writes a real short letter to a group of Christ followers who are struggling. They're being harassed because of their faith in Jesus. They're being bullied around because of their faith in Jesus, and he writes them this letter to encourage them to stand fast. And look at what he says to them. Here's what he says. Peter, an apostle of Jesus, to God's elect, to the exiles who are scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, all those places. Those who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ, sprinkled with his blood. Grace, peace be yours in abundance. Praise be to the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, for in his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, into an inheritance that can never perish, can never spoil, can never fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. He writes to a group of people who are struggling. Look at how he refers to them, okay? He says, to God's elect, to those who are chosen by God himself to be obedient to Jesus by the work of the Holy Spirit in their lives, who are sprinkled with his blood. And usually that would be totally disgusting, but when you understand the symbolism, you realize that is totally a blessing. It says he has given us new birth, second chances, third chances, fourth chances, a new life. You were something old, and maybe you thought, maybe you did mess up, and you saw yourself as a failure, but you have been given new life according to Jesus, a new birth. You have a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus, not just something that did happen, it's something that will happen in your own life. You have an inheritance that cannot perish, cannot spoil, cannot fade. It's not going away, and Jesus is holding it in heaven for you, waiting till the time he gets to see you face to face. Look at how he uses new words to describe people. He says, no longer we're going to use words like I'm just worthless. He says, how about this word? I am elect. I'm no longer going to see myself as nothing. I'm going to see myself as chosen by God himself. I'm not going to see myself as a failure. I'm going to see myself as obedient to Jesus by the work of the Holy Spirit in and through me. You've got new words to describe you. I would encourage you to take these words that Peter uses and apply to them to your life, that I am one of God's elect. I have been chosen by the knowledge of God. I've chosen to be obedient to Jesus through the power of the Spirit. See if you notice, Peter writes differently here than he used to talk. Peter used to say things like, I'll never betray you, I'll never fall away, I'll never, I, and he makes a whole bunch of promises of what he's going to do with his own strength and power. Here, as he writes to these guys, he says real hope comes when you stop talking about all the things you're going to do for God, and you look to God and you see what God has already done for you. And when I see all that God has done for me, I can recognize and receive what God wants to do in me. And when I see what God has done for me and what God has done in me, and I get my eyes off what I'm going to do and how I could do it and how I, and it's all him. When I see what he's done for me, what I see what he's done in me, then I can see what he's going to do through me. And I get my eyes off me and I get them on him. And then I am no longer a mistake, a failure, or all of those other words. Now, does this give us permission just to let our guard down and live a passive life? No way. This isn't passive. This is fully focused on God and all that he has for us. And Jesus, wanting to make sure that we're always reminded, as he ate that Passover meal with his disciples, he said, guys, I want you to take note. And I want you, as my followers, when you gather, to take at least the most simple elements of this meal and do them again and again and again. And for the last 2,000 years of Jesus following, Christ followers have gathered in worship, and they've taken a piece of bread, and they've taken a cup of wine or juice, and let the bread represent the body of Christ and the juice, wine, represent the blood of Christ, and said, I receive what Jesus did for me. And it's not about me. It's not about what I've done or I'm going to do for God. It's all about Jesus and what he's done for me, in me, and he'll do through me. Today, if you struggle wondering if you are worth anything in God's eyes, I'm going to invite you to this table. And my prayer for you is that you will be reminded of just how valuable you are, that Jesus would give his life for you, that you are not a mistake and that you don't have to live under condemnation, but that you are forgiven, you are free, you are loved by God Almighty.